All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our talk. My name is Konieczny. I'm the technical animator on Far Cry 4. I'm here with Julien Pelletier. He was the physics programmer on Far Cry 4. We're with Ubisoft Montreal. Today, we're going to be talking about how we made the animals of Far Cry look realistic and natural and grounded in a complex world. So with the overwhelming success of animals in Far Cry 3, animals have become a brand staple. So with Far Cry 4, we had to take it to the next level. We had to add more animals, bigger animals. So we had animals like the yak, the rhino, elephants, and we had to put them in the mountains. So we had to make sure that they could adapt to any type of terrain. So today I'm going to talk about some of our goals, our limitations, kind of our solutions for handling this, and kind of the next steps development, and things for the future. So first I'll talk about our goal. The goal is pretty straightforward. We needed believable wildlife that can adapt to any type of terrain. We had a few constraints we had to deal with. We had to ship on current gen and next gen, so PS3, 360. So we had to abide by some strict kind of memory and CPU constraints. So next I'll talk about some of the limitations we had. So the way we handled animals on terrain in Far Cry 3 was basically calculating the normals of the ground using the physics capsule, and then aligning the character to the ground based on those normals. Although this worked pretty well for smaller animals, animals like the elephant didn't look very realistic. It looked like the elephant was going to fall over the hill. So we really had to make it look more natural and more balanced. We also had issues with the giant capsule size of the character. Smaller details in the ground would cause the feet to either clip through the ground or float above the ground. So we had to figure out a way to make the feet connect with the ground and make the character look more natural. This video just kind of illustrates some of the issues with the Far Cry 3 technique. Simply rotating the capsule isn't enough. You get a lot of detail ground that causes the character to shake and rotate really rapidly. The feet aren't always touching the ground. It really looks unnatural, and it breaks the immersion, breaks the realism of the character. So next, what's our solution? So to solve this, we considered actually generating animations for the different slope angles that the animal could walk on. Creating blendable walk cycles that could blend for pitch up, pitch down, pitch flat, and blending these. And then applying IK over the legs to kind of fix up the ground, smaller ground details. Make sure that the feet were planted at all times. However, this isn't ideal. It would take a lot of animations to cover all the circumstances. For every single animation, we had a large number of animations for all of our animals. And so it was just too expensive. We couldn't do it. We didn't have enough time. Also, memory was kind of a budget. We had a 30 megabyte budget on PS3 and 360, so we really had to keep it tight as far as what we could add to the game. And unfortunately, we couldn't find a mocap suit big enough for elephants, so we couldn't capture all these motions the way we wanted them. So our approach was two major steps. First, we kind of gave a gross posture adjustment of the character using additive poses, and I'll get into this in a bit. Second, we use IK, inverse kinematics, to give us a finer detail of foot placement on the ground. And then next, after I talk about those things, Julien's going to kind of get into the runtime side of things, the runtime magic. So first, the gross posture adjustment. Looking at a lot of reference footage, you can see that based on different slopes, the animal really adjusts his body to kind of adjust the center of mass to kind of counter the effects of gravity. So shifting the weight in a different manner based on the slope. We decided to represent this shift in the center of mass using additive poses. We would layer animations. We would generate 5 different poses for each of the pitch angles, the roll angles, and then we would blend these together and then additively layer these over the top of our existing locomotion. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that we had complete artistic control over this. The animators could pose the animal, make them look natural in the different extreme slope angles. So as you can see on the left, the walk pose, as it was animated on a flat terrain, rotated on a 30-degree angle, looks very unnatural, unbalanced. But when you apply an additive pose to it, the pose in the center in the blue, you get a much more natural result when you apply, as you see in the image on the right. This next video kind of shows additive working on a roll. So in the red, you see the Far Cry 3 elephant looks like he's going to topple over. While when we use additives, we could just adjust the feet rather than shifting and rotating the whole body. This is an example of a walk cycle, and it looks like very unnatural. Once again, it's very, looks like he's going to topple over. It doesn't look balanced. But when we apply the additive, the elephant in the blue looks a lot more natural, more grounded. So it's has a lot more appeal as well. So next I'll talk about the foot placement using inverse kinematics. We decided to use Autodesk's Human IK middleware to handle this. We wanted more than 2-bone IK, and we were also using Motion Builder for authoring our animations, so it made sense for us to, and it was very easy for us to actually generate from our Motion Builder rig, generate a lightweight version of this rig and use this in the runtime. So that was our runtime rig. Also on the data setup, we had to add 4 bones to our skeleton. Each of these bones was parented to the hips, the root of the character, I should say. And these bones were then constrained to the foot FK bones. We then baked out each one of the animations with this data in them. And these bones represented the IK targets. This next video kind of shows the IK targets baked out. And basically you get trajectories for the feet in character space. In the engine, we would actually reach our, IK would reach to these targets that we bake out of the animations. This next video kind of shows in-game how an animation, the trajectory of the feet are applied. And when you apply an additive to this, we kind of warp the path of those trajectories. So what was the role of IK? IK, as I mentioned, the first thing that IK did for us was to reach to those IK targets that we bake out of our animations. Second of all is pretty straightforward, just keep the feet from going through the ground. This next video kind of shows IK and additives kind of working in conjunction in real time. Looks like they were getting bored. So next I'm going to hand it over to Julien. He's going to talk about the runtime magic.
So hi everyone. I'm going to discuss about the runtime processing of things and a little bit of what goes behind the scenes to accomplish our approach. First, let's take a look at our physics model. For our animals, we use multiple capsules. We have a large capsule on the upper portion of the body that encompasses the body itself, and we have another smaller capsule on the upper portion of the legs. This dual capsule setup was very fast in terms of collision resolutions, and it's also very easy to adjust and tune. We also had the capsule floating above the ground to help the locomotion. I will discuss a little bit more about this on the next slide. In terms of raycasting, we first start by throwing two raycasts, one in the front and one on the rear of the entity. This is shown in yellow here. This gives us 2 hit points with the ground that we then use to compute the pitch and the roll angle. The pitch angle uses the positions of those 2 hit points, whereas the roll angle uses information in the normals of those hit points. Finally, we raycast 4 more times underneath each foot to have precise ground placement and to make sure that the feet never goes to the ground. The picture above here shows the reason why we decided to go with a floating capsule. If you try to sweep a complex shape like a capsule on a complex terrain, you will experience large pitch angle fluctuations, and this will result into an overall bumpy locomotion, which is shown in green here. By having the capsule floating, we are able to smooth out the locomotion and have a much smoother trajectory. This is the reason why we decided to go that way for our animals. Just as a side note, if we, to accomplish this, we had to override the Havoc's ground support code. An important aspect with dealing with IK is the height correction problem, which is also known as the hips correction problem. Let's take a quick look at the biped case here to explain the problem. The middle picture here shows that if we only apply IK on the legs, one leg will be properly connected to the ground, as you can see, but the other foot is unable to reach the ground, which results into an overstretching of one of the 2 legs. Typically, a way to correct this is to readjust the hips position. In this case, we move the character slightly downwards in order for both foot to connect to the ground and for both legs to look natural. The quadruped case is very similar. There exists a specific height for the animal so that the legs will look not too overextended and not too overcompressed. We also, for the quadruped, have to we also need to find an orientation on the body. So the goal here is to find this height and orientation at runtime and simply apply it to the entity. The way we do this is on the data side, we define what looks best visually in terms of minimum, maximum, and ideal leg extension. And at runtime, we adjust the height and orientation of the character so that the legs try to reach as close as possible to their ideal leg extension. The following video illustrates this height correction algorithm being turned on and off. As you can see, with the correction on, the legs are properly grounded at all times, so all 4 legs are always connected to the ground. This next part shows the effect of turning on and off IK. It shows also the importance of how IK helps grounding the character. This little video shows the elephant without entity correction going on a hill. As you can see, he's sort of guiding over, and he's not absorbing the bump very well. With entity correction on, the legs are adapting to the terrain much better, and this gives an overall much more natural movement. Let's take a quick look at the way we implemented this system in our engine. So we use a component-based engine. We have, first of all, on the game side, we have a high-level component that we call the quadruped ground follow component. This component is responsible to throw the raycast, compute the pitch and the roll angle, compute the entity correction that we discussed earlier, and finally compute the effector position, so where exactly to place the feet. With this information is then sent out to 3 engine-level components. The first engine-side component that is involved is the animation component. This one simply takes as an input the pitch and the roll angle. It then computes the additive pose and applies it to the skeleton. A new component we had to create, in our case, is the IK component, which basically wraps up the human IK library. It takes as an input the effector positions and orientations for where to place each foot. And as a result, it procedurally modifies the transforms of the legs in order for the feet to reach their desired destination. In a glimpse, the way it works inside, what we need to compute here is first we have to transfer our skeleton transforms to the human IK skeleton. We then need to set the effector transforms, call the solver, which is in this case the limbs-only solver, which is a specialized and optimized solver that human IK provide. We then finally transfer back the human IK skeleton transforms into our character. This, performance-wise, does take some time, but it was overall fairly reasonable in our case. The final component involved in our solution is the character physics component. This component simply applies the height and the orientation computed from the entity correction down to the Havoc character controller underneath, which results into moving the capsule and the entity height. So this was an overview of the 4 components involved in realizing our solution. Also, we had to develop an LOD strategy for our player versus player game mode on current gen. In this game mode, there is a lot of action happening, players shooting at each other, and there were lots of animals involved. And the cost with IK was a little bit too high. So we decided to go simple with this LOD strategy and simply keep the first part of our solution, which is the gross posture adjustment, and simply turn off IK. On the picture on the left side here, you can see all the systems being turned on. On the right side, you can see our LOD system. As you can see, the feet are now a little bit floaty, and one foot is actually now clipping through that rock because IK is off. But we keep the gross posture adjustment of the elephant. So as you can imagine, with a nice weight transfer, it kind of looks nice from a distance when you're into an action scene. So this allowed us to save 70% in a very, very easy way. So just as a reminder, this was used on Far Cry 4 only on current gen and only in that specific game mode. It was not based on distance. This little video shows an interesting stress test we did for physics and IK. We basically had a little bit of fun throwing all the animals that use IK on the mountain in a complex situation. And we were kind of examining their posture and making sure that they look great at all times in this stressful situation. And it was also a way to test the performance and make sure that we were fitting within budgets. So that was it for the runtime part, and Drew will now discuss a little bit about the issues we faced along our way.
Thank you, Julien. So obviously our solution wasn't perfect. We had, obviously, the devil's in the details. So I'm going to talk about some of the issues we found and how we solved them very briefly because there's a lot of stuff to get into. So I'm just going to go over the high-level stuff. So we had to deal with edge cases. Animals fighting, animal versus animal, predator and prey kind of interactions. So we had these complex animations, and we had to disable IK in certain situations, so we had to add animation tags to set the timing of when we can turn on and off these systems. We also had to deal with different animal topologies. An elephant moves quite a bit differently than a tiger, and the tiger can do things that the elephant can't do, for example. The tiger could jump on rooftops, and so we had to have different tuning settings so we can have different data sets for each of the different types of animals. We also had a complex character, the Yeti, in our DLC, so we had to be able to transition between 4 legs and 2 legs. So we had to actually change their stance. We had to change their capsule. We had to determine a way to blend between the different stances, and also turning on and off the effectors at certain times in the animations when the transition would occur. So what's next? I'm going to talk about some of the issues that we still have and that we're looking to improve for the future, and some of the next steps for this development. So our system is very reactive. We have a small issue with peaks where the feet aren't always planted, and you have this kind of, the characters kind of rocking over the tops of hills in an extreme situation like this. So you get these, either the feet aren't touching or you get these ghost footsteps. So how do we solve that? Things that we're going to be looking at is foot trajectory analysis, looking at the animation curve data for the foot trajectories, and actually turning on and off foot IK and having the pinning at certain times in the animation procedurally, so just doing this automatically. We're also going to be looking at full body IK. We weren't able to use full body IK because we had to make it ship on current gen. So we're going to be evaluating using full body IK in the future. This next video kind of shows a proof of concept of full body IK and foot pinning working together. You can see that the full body IK really helps the body, helps the legs get to where they need to be, and it really gives it a more natural motion rather than hyperextending the legs. And so this is just kind of a proof of concept video. We're also going to be looking at predictive footstep planning. So looking ahead of time where the foot is going to be planted, the next footstep is going to occur, and adjusting the feet and body ahead of time, trying to be more predictive rather than reactive. So we're also going to be looking at Autodesk Creature Solver. We didn't have this available to us at the time, and we're going to be looking at this as well. So let's see it all working together. This video kind of shows all the components working together in one whole system. Thanks a lot. We have a few minutes for questions. Please step up to the mic.
So given the sort of performance expense, even on the next-gen platforms, how many animals did you guys have running simultaneously using this technique?
So the question was, how many animals can we have running using this technique? You have the answer.
I think it's about 20. To my last knowledge, it's between 15 and 20 are running smoothly on next gen. I think this was the budget. It was current?
Yeah.
Current gen. On current gen, it's a little bit less. I think we're talking about around 10.
Any other questions? Got one here.
Did you have any specific animations where the additive blending looked bad? It just didn't work for a certain attack or something?
Okay, so the question was, do we have any any animations that the additive didn't work well on? So yeah, actually there were. We actually, some of the extreme pitch angles like running, sprinting, shifting the weight too much for the character would cause some hyperextension in the poses. So we found that a lot of our faster motions that we had to actually dial back the shifting of the weight. So good question. Next.
Could you talk a little bit about your LOD selection strategy? Was it just based on screen size, or was there a limit for each LOD? Did you have zones that were authored where you couldn't have more than a certain number of animals?
Was our LOD system being used based on distance or with any other technique? The answer to this is that LOD system was actually not a full-fledged LOD system that's based on distance and that's blendable. It was actually a quick LOD system we did at the last minute to optimize the performance on a specific platform, and it was actually always on in that platform. So it was kind of a reduced quality for current gen, more than a full-fledged LOD system.
And in a specific PvP setting as well.
Thank you.
Can you go into more detail about your floating capsules? Like, did you average the two ray traces down to get the point, or how did you determine how far off the ground those capsules would be?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So you said you had the floating capsules and the gap beneath them.
Yes.
So how are you deciding, like, where the ground plane is to have your capsule float, and so you could approximate the average?
Mm-hmm. What we did is, first of all, the capsules at the bottom of the entity were about, if you stretch the leg of the animals the most that you can, this is where we were putting the capsules. So it was about the length of how much the legs can move. But in terms of raycasting, what we did is we basically throw the two rays that I discussed about, and those rays have a certain distance with the ground, and we were then using the information that I discussed about in our data. We defined the ideal leg extension. So with those two, with knowing where the point of the raycast starts and where it ends, and the ideal distance, we then use this information to calculate the delta and then move the entity downwards and calculate the orientation, basically.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question over here.
Yeah. For the raycasting points, was there a separation between like renderable geometry and collision geometry? And if so, which one were you casting against?
We have two collision geometry in our world, one that is simple and one that is high res. And for this problem, we have to use the high res because we want the foot to be exactly pinned to the ground. And so the cheaper, the more simple collision planes were not enough.
Any other questions? Oh, one more.
I was just curious on the corrective poses that you had for going up and downhill. Did you have to have them modeled at, to overcompensate to account for the animation blending, or did they do it more where they'd want it to be?
So did we compensate?
Like to model the weight shift, did they lean extra forward knowing that would be blended with the walk animation?
No, we tried to make the additives work for all situations, and we also we found that we found kind of a happy medium that would kind of work for everything. That worked pretty general. We as I mentioned before, we kind of had to compromise a little bit for certain situations like faster motions, so that the idle would look good. We also looked at trying to blend, actually have different extremes based on movement speeds as well. So that was something that we're going to try as well.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. One more question over here.
Yeah, I'm curious. How do you deal with the extreme angles? Like you're starting to go, and then do you just ragdoll or something like that, or?
For extreme angles, how do we deal with extreme angles? As far as locomotion goes, we were able to support up to 30 degrees. Anything more than that, we couldn't navigate there for the animals. One thing we're going to look at in the future, if we wanted to go more than 30, I don't think additives would be enough. I think we would actually need to support different types of locomotion. Actually, we were going to actually consider, animating some of these different extreme angles, because it's not just a pose at that point. You're changing the motion. So
Yeah, there's some slide and stuff like that, right?
yeah,
All right.
I think that's it. All right, thank you.